Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Board Game Buffet podcast, episode number 91. My name is Dean.
This is Graham.
And Graham, here we are beginning, well, I guess mid-May now, should be the beginning of May, but it's actually mid-May of 2021, cruising along. Summer's almost upon us. School year's getting out for those people that have kids. And what would be the exciting time of convention season coming upon us is once again looks like it's may not happen for the vast majority of us. Saw the notice yesterday or the day before that World Board Gaming Championships has officially canceled for the year. They were scheduled to do it in July. That was their hopes. They have postponed, which you got to make decisions that you got to make. I know some people are upset about it. Most people seem to take it in stride and understood. And I don't know of, I think, well, Dice Tower Con officially canceled a while ago. Origins, I think, is still on tentatively, but I wouldn't be surprised if even that gets maybe bumped. I know September, well, here in the United States, I mean, things seem to be going pretty good as far as vaccinations. I mean, obviously we're not, 100%, but we had a pretty good rollout and a pretty strong push to get people out there and get them vaccinated. So maybe the conventions will take place in the fall, but I don't know with travel. I mean, how that'll fare for international visitors and stuff like that. But I'm assuming most of them will be a much reduced venue or capacity than what they were in the past. So
I'm also thinking, for myself, I'm sure like a lot of people have kids, and I know you were saying you're a lot of the kids in the US are getting out of school nowish. Here we tend to go until end of June. So our summer is July, August, and they go back at the beginning of September. A lot of these cons are being pushed till mid to end of September, end of September into October. I'm thinking, I don't know, during the summer it's fine, but I wonder how much that's going to cut down even domestic people saying, I got kids in school, I just can't go off for a week just because you wanted to push it out.
Yeah, and I know for Origins was always one of those ones that when they were, because they were always in June, and sometimes they'd be at the very beginning of June, and people would complain, "Oh, my kids aren't out of school yet," and then they'd push it back a couple weeks so that it was more family friendly. So yeah, I mean, you're right. I hadn't thought about it, but September, October, I mean, that's going to cut into a lot of people's, family, not even family time, but just school time and the hassle of starting a new school year and things like that. So yeah, I would venture to guess, I mean, even my little regional con, which is normally in March, that's scheduled now for the end of October. I mean, it's only a 3-day thing, so I don't know if it'll really affect it a whole lot, other than there was always another convention in September, I think.
Right.
So I don't know. Be nice just to get everything back to a normal, the normal pecking order of where people are at for, different months for the different cons, and then just let people decide, if they want to attend or not. But obviously, as someone that's organizing the con, you have to weigh a lot of factors in there. And I'm sure some of them are under pressure, financial pressure, because, depending on what their contracts were, they may not be able to afford to not have anything this year if they're going to be held to their contracts. And that's why a lot of cons were kind of waiting to even put stuff on the calendar, because they didn't want the risk of having non-refundable deposits and things like that. So yeah, that's we'll see. I mean, we'll see which whether it's conventions or just businesses in general, which ones survive this whole pandemic. And some of them are going to come out much stronger, and some of them are going to realize that the business model was not very good.
So looking into your crystal ball, so let's say some of the smaller ones cons just fold because they can't afford to lose 2 years in a row not having a con. Let's say in 2022 things are back to normal. People can fly with no problems, like international flights, no problems getting around. We have the vaccines and everybody who wants it. Do you think the 2022 cons are going to be almost impossible to get to then? Because you've had 2 years of people waiting to go to a con And then if some of the smaller cons collapse, you're like, well, let's say you're CincyCon, let's say that shut down. You're like, well, okay, CincyCon's no longer happening, so I can only go to Gen Con, Origins, or PAX, or Board Game Geek or Dice Tower. And if everybody thinks like that, those tickets are going to be gone before you know it. Or do you think it's people are going to take a kind of wait and see, like, oh, CincyCon's down, I'm not going to bother going to another con. Which way do you think it's going to flow?
Well, yeah, okay. So my guess would be, well, I don't know if there really is a way you could guess on it, because part of me says, yeah, there are going to be some people that are going to be so desperate to go to cons that they're going to try to go to as many as they can, and whether their favorite one is canceled, not canceled, whatever. But I also think, the small regional cons, historically, they run for a few years and then they disappear. And then a new con pops up in their place, maybe organized by someone who was, worked on the staff of the old one. They kind of take it over and rename it, rebrand it, whatever, because those small cons are very hard to survive. I mean, unless you're on a razor thin budget. So them coming and going is not uncommon. I mean, I don't know how many different small regional cons that I've attended, since high school. And there's probably, I mean, they're always kind of in the same town, but there's probably been 5 or 6 iterations of them under different names or whatever. So that is what it is. The big ones, I'm assuming they've got enough cushion to survive. And yeah, people may be excited to go to them, but I also think you're going to have a group of people that, after a couple years of not going, and maybe it's forced people who went, like, so someone like myself, where I get a lot of my gaming in during the year at cons. Maybe other people have been fortunate enough where, if that was what they did and they're home more than I am, that they actually just formed a gaming group and they're getting a lot more gaming in locally. So maybe they don't feel like they need to go to the con to pay the price or to run the risk. And I think you're going to have some people that just aren't ever going to go back to cons because they're just not going to want to risk it. So I don't.
And bring up the last point of not willing to risk it. Do you think that's actually going to increase local cons? For example, we have a couple of local cons here in the Toronto area, and even during the summer, they're saying, for us in Ontario, they're saying the likelihood of you being able to travel even inter-province, not even down to the US, but just inter-province here, probably won't happen until the last part of the summer, maybe early fall. But in province, they're predicting kind of the highlight, prime time and during the summer. So if you started a con for people in Ontario, is this going to be the rebirth of the regional con? Because even when things start getting open, I don't know how long this inbuilt fear that we have of people gathering in large groups. A friend of ours, Eric, was talking about going to see the Genesis concert. I know you're feeling about Mr. Phil Collins there, but just in general,
I would rather get COVID than have to go to a Genesis concert.
I'm even thinking, I'm not so sure I'm ready right now. And again, we are a month or two behind you guys in terms of the progress of getting vaccines out. I don't think I'm ready to be in a large group when you're cheek to jowl with thousands of other people.
Yeah. So it's weird because there are times that, because, I've been out working since this thing started, interfacing with people, going into people's homes,
sleeping on their beds, eating their food,
being in close quarters with them. And yes, we've worn masks, but at the beginning we weren't. And so we've worn masks now. And as it's gone along, it becomes kind of habit of, okay, I put my mask on, I get in my van. Like I told you before, I put my mask on, I'm like pumping gas. I'm like, what the hell am I wearing my mask on? I'm pumping gas. So some of it, you become just a creature of habit. But then there are other things that I'm extremely paranoid about. Like, I haven't flown since it started. And I was in California for 4 months, and I wouldn't fly home for my provisional weekends, and I wouldn't allow I wouldn't allow Amy to fly out to me because it wasn't worth the risk. So I was very diligent about that. But then we just went to my daughter's pinning ceremony for her med prep stuff with school, And I thought, okay, well, it's going to be mandatory. Everyone wears masks. And there were a few people wearing masks in there, but no one else was wearing masks. And you were only allowed to have 2 people per student. But there was probably 150 of us in a little auditorium. But I mean, we're sitting, shoulder to shoulder. And but I was fine with that too. Now I don't know how many people there have been fully vaccinated. I mean, my daughter and Amy are fully vaccinated. I've had my second shot. It hasn't been quite 2 weeks yet, but I mean, I felt comfortable enough doing that. And I'm assuming, I know it's a big assumption, but I'm assuming most people are being responsible enough that if they aren't vaccinated, that maybe they're wearing a mask. Probably not. I know that's probably that's probably a bad assumption on my part. But at some point in time, it does become a personal risk assessment. Um, and now, if I hadn't been vaccinated, yeah, I would wear one. I think just out of courtesy to other people. And I know even if you're vaccinated, you can still carry. But I'm assuming if people haven't been vaccinated, then they should definitely be wearing a mask. I mean, it's one of those where if you're not vaccinated, you're not wearing a mask. That's not really on me now to then protect you, in my opinion. Anyways, I don't want to turn around into a debate on that or whatever. But I think a smaller regional con, yeah, for someone like you where you can't travel outside the province, makes perfect sense. If I lived in Columbus and CABS, the Columbus Area Board Gaming Society, was meeting, I mean, I would go there all the time because it's a small setting, probably definitely less than 100 people probably at a time. That's close quarters because, you're gathered around game boards. But I would feel comfortable enough, especially being fully vaccinated. But I haven't heard anything about it. I mean, they just announced today that we're not going to wear masks outside if you're fully vaccinated. So I mean, every venue I think that I've heard of is going to be at 75% capacity indoors. So, I mean, we're at a different place, between the two countries. So to me, it's like, well, I don't get the whole how you're going to stop someone going from one province to another. I mean, I don't know how your provinces are set up, but to me, there'd be no way you could stop people going from state to state in the United States. I don't know how you're going to do it province to province.
You shoot on
But
sight here.
do you shoot them with little marshmallow bullets,
Yep.
Little Nerf guns? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just don't get me wrong. I would love to be able to go and get some face-to-face gaming in and see people I want to see. But at the same time, if it doesn't happen, my life isn't really impacted that much by it. There's enough alternatives. And again, for me, it's a hobby. It's a hobby that I love. It's a hobby that I enjoy, but it's not life or death. I mean, and it's certainly not worth anyone's life either.
So we were talking before we started recording that you and I had talked about going to Origins this year, and you've already booked the hotel. I was just saying I will be having my second vaccine by then, but who knows when the border is going to open. So I can't commit, in the way it's looking, is who knows when that border is going to be open.
Mm-hmm.
As it stands right now, I know you probably won't go by yourself, but do you have any qualms about going to Origins by yourself?
I mean, I've done it before. My first year I went by myself.
But in terms of in this environment that we're in, do you feel, are you comfortable walking into a con the size of Origins? Yes, you have you both shots. So are you okay basically just saying, yeah, I'll go anywhere now? After your 2 weeks is up, you're up for anything. Or has COVID fundamentally changed your outlook on large group gatherings?
I don't think Origins would bother me. I still am not thrilled about getting on an airplane with circulated air, just pumping, through it. Because I mean, yes, I know if you're fully vaccinated, I mean, you can still be asymptomatic and you can be a carrier of it. But at the same time, you can still get it. I mean, there's a small chance that you can get it. I know it's a freak accident if it happens, but I wouldn't be opposed to going to Origins. I don't think I would go though this year if I was going by myself. I think those days are kind of over for me. And I don't know if it's, I mean, if I knew people that were going to be there and we were going to meet up and we were going to hang out, we were going to game, that'd be different. But if I was just going in cold, it's almost like, I almost feel like I'm starting over again in the hobby. And it sounds kind of weird, but it's like, Is it really worth the effort? I could just stay home and play some solo games and, and be done with it.
Yeah. So we should probably move on to some different news as opposed to talking about the downbeat news of COVID. I have another question for you.
Yeah.
So we were talking before that one of our listeners is going to send you um, bits for terraforming Mars, like blinged out
Yeah.
bits.
Lance.
Yes, Lance, that's right. And you had said that you're going to use them, but it's not something that you're drawn to. You're not drawn to making the bits or buying the bits yourself. So I just got I got a second 3D printer. So I think I'm up to 60 printer now, something like that. And I've been looking at the board game accessories, and I think I'm in the same. Even though I now have the capacity to print my own 3D pieces for board games, I'm not sure whether I'm going to do that or not. So I have a regular 3D printer that does, melts the plastic and extrudes it. The one I just got is a resin printer, which is, much higher quality, does much better prints. And I don't think I'm going to be using it for board gaming bits. So if you had a resin printer, so the question is back to you, if you had a resin printer, would you print your own 3D bits for the games that you enjoy?
Probably not. I mean, first off, I have no desire to have a 3D printer at all. Dan just got a resin printer, and he's been making a lot of bits for wargaming, not necessarily for board gaming, but for miniature wargaming and stuff. He's making some stuff for board games, but he's really into that kind of stuff. He's always into downloading different PDF files and stuff for his different games. For me, I'm not a computer person. I would never make a print and play game, and I have no desire to buy a 3D printer and make, however long it takes to make, an individual bit and then multiply that out by, I need 30 of those. I mean, if I wanted the bits, I'd just buy them.
Right.
I wouldn't waste my time making them. But I'm just not, I like bits, but it's not something that I actively seek out. Like even the ones on BGG, is it the Geek Bit ones, the really nice ones?
Mm-hmm.
I look at them like, yeah, those are really cool, but that's like the price of the game. And I don't see the point in that. I don't want to, rain on anyone's parade. It's just not for me. I don't play games enough to warrant doing that. So why did you buy a 3D printer if you're not gonna? What are you gonna make with it? You just wanted a resin printer.
I just wanted a resin printer. I am.
And you say I have a sickness with expansions. At least my expansions, if I ever get to play the games, they will get played.
So I have a my background is IT and computers. I'm always on the bleeding edge of technology. I'm always kind of the first people I know that to jump on any bandwagon of technology wise, just because I enjoy tinkering. So I had a regular 3D printer before, and then I started looking at the resin printers and figured, it was on sale. So I figured, I'll save a couple bucks and buy it.
You're going to be the guy that buys a resin printer for whatever they are, $500. You're going to make one whistle and that's it.
I have printed my first mini,
Okay.
a little Minotaur. It definitely is.
So that's the resin one.
Yeah. So that's a resin print. So if you're listening to the podcast, if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see the. I'm holding up.
Looks pretty detailed.
It is. I don't know if you can see it, but if you kind of look at the skin on his back, you can actually see like all the individual,
like scales
or whatnot. Yeah, the resin printer, they do beautiful work. I will probably be printing out things like minis because I enjoy assembling minis and painting minis, so I'll probably do that as opposed to anything with board games.
Well, I'll tell you what, not that I actively seek out 3D files or whatever, but if you need something to print out, I'll look for some. I'll send you a list of stuff you can print out on your 3D printer, so you feel like you're getting your money's worth out of it. So I have a feeling you just got it because Lala has a kiln for her glass, and so you wanted a resin printer, so you had your own little toy, and you guys could sit there and compete.
Well, so I have two 3D printers. I technically have a third one that I backed on Kickstarter, which I don't have yet. But that one also had a laser engraver in it, and I was very, very tempted to buy myself a laser cutter for doing laser cut wood and all that. They just came down a little, and it was easier to vent. I might get myself a laser cutter again,
So
just to have it.
with all this technology you have, you should be creating a 3D file. I'm going to say, I don't know what the right word is for it. Schematic. Why are you not pumping out Board Game Buffet bling, like logos or the little creatures? Why aren't you making 3D models of those and printing them out so we can give them away?
I'm working on the 3D, the bust of you that we can give out to people.
That's a lot of resin. Does that be pre-beard or post-beard?
It's your choice. There's going to be two different ones. There's grizzly Liggett.
If I end up just falling left out of this chair, you'll know. If I disappear, it's because, for those watching the video, there's a stream of light coming through the blinds in my daughter's bedroom where I'm recording. And so I keep leaning farther and farther left to avoid it. And I'm almost like out of space to go. So, and it's really starting to hurt my neck. But, speaking of 3D printers and stuff, so I was working down in Georgia recently, and I went to a person's house, and I was inside doing my thing, and I had to go into the son's bedroom. So the son was like, yeah, so I'm looking in the closet, and he's got up on the shelf, he's got Gloomhaven, Mansions of Madness, second edition. I think we had Eldritch Horror up there. And I said, oh, I say fan of Gloomhaven. This kid is, well, I say kid, somewhere college age-ish. He's like, oh yeah, he's like, I really like Eldritch Horror, whatever. He's like, I have Gloomhaven, we haven't ever been able to play it, and but we're doing a D&D group. I'm like, oh yeah. So I was just chit-chatting with him for about, I don't know, about a minute. Next thing I know, I'm out in the living room area trying to do my thing, and he's like bringing me up all these miniatures that he printed out from his 3D printer and that he had painted or whatever. And I'm thinking, oh Lord. And I opened the door. So, but I'm such a bad marketing person. I didn't even mention the podcast or anything.
If you had a 3D printed bust of your head with the Board Game Buffet on the bottom, you could just give them to him.
I'll get rid of my business cards and just start leaving that with people as I go.
So
yeah,
with the 3D printers, I know there's still kind of a rarity, but there's more and more people getting them. Would you buy a game that there's one edition that had with all the minis? Like, let's say it was a CMON game. Here's the box for $100, and you have all the minis in. And here's the box that is like $40, but you have to print all the minis yourself. They give you the files, but it's up to you to print them all. Would that ever entice you to it? Or are you just like, no, I want my game to be complete out of the box. I don't have to do anything to play the game.
I guess it would depend on if the minis were integral to playing the game. Like I had to have them. I couldn't just use cubes.
You can always just use cubes.
I know, but I'm saying if it's CMON, if it's that thematic that I need to have the minis, I don't know what 3D printers cost. I think I would just buy it with the minis, only because for my particular circumstance, because for me, so I guess I could take a 3D printer with me on the road. One more thing, in my hotel room, I had to haul up and haul back. They already think I'm like some sort of shooting some sort of adult films in my room with all the lighting and stuff I take up and I've set up. To me, it's not the money, it's the time. I've got less time than I've got money. I'd rather just pay the price, have the minis, So if I want to play it, so when I get that brand new CMON game and I look at it and I know the minis are in there and I stick it up on my shelf and say, in 3 years, I'll be back, my friend. I want those minis ready to go. I don't want to have to think about printing those out over the next 3 years and then putting them into the box, breaking the shrink on the box to put the miniatures in. Now, will the box without the miniatures come big enough to fit the miniatures in when I print them?
I would assume so. Yeah. I'm assuming that they would have exactly the same production. Just one box they would fill with minis and one box they wouldn't fill with minis.
I'd probably just buy it, even though, I mean, you're probably talking to the wrong guy, because while I like miniature war gaming, I don't necessarily care about minis in my board games. That seems kind of weird, but I don't ever just stare at the minis in a board game and like lose myself. Like, oh, was it my turn? I'm sorry, I was just staring at this goblin over here and looking at how cool it is. To me, half the time they're just pieces on the board.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I would never buy the lesser game, not the lesser game, the game without the minis, unless it was an option. Like, this is the version with the minis. This is the version with the cubes, with the minis files, if you want to print them. So I could play the game without having the physical minis. That's the one I would always go towards. But I've been wondering I doubt this is ever going to happen, because I don't think that people when they look at the money time, they think, okay, well, if the CMON game's $100 and without the minis, let's say it's $50. Let's say it's half price. Yeah, but the printer cost me $500 and each mini is going to cost me 25 cents. So if I have to print out, 20 minis or whatever else, that's still, $5 for me to spend plus the cost of the printer. Therefore, it's not worth, like you'd have to buy many games.
Right.
To justify the cost of the 3D printer. That I don't, I always find that people that are new into 3D printing say, oh yeah, I would do that. It's like, yeah, but if you think about it, why would the companies do that? Because they'll probably sell, 95 copies of the regular game and maybe 5 copies of the mini less game. It wouldn't be worth their while to do it. And because they're doing mass production of those minis are not costing them $50.
Right. Oh no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there have been many games we've talked about where, we've said, oh, I wish they offered us the miniature version and the cube version. And we've generally said we've always take the cube version. And I think I probably still would for most games. But in the example you're giving, where it's like the minis or the PDF files, I mean, I guess I got plenty of cubes. I could just pull them out and do them. But if my choice was only to play it with the minis they give me, or that I have to print out the minis of the PDF file, I think I would always side with just buying the minis. I think people that like the 3D print, they generally tend to love it. And maybe it wears off over time, when, like anything else, when you get it, it's all shiny and new. But I think for a lot of people, that's just kind of like another hobby for them, seeing what they can print. Yep. And so I think they enjoy doing it. And, maybe they do run the numbers, and after I pay for this, after the 300th miniature that I've printed, I'll, everything there is going to be free. But again, I think it's a personal, it depends on what your personal situation is. For me, I just don't have the type of time, nor do I feel like I'm competent enough technologically to, like, to me, your worst nightmare would be me getting a 3D printer, because I would be blowing you up on Twitter, messaging you like, okay, when it says power on, what does that mean? Is that, which button is that? There's oh my God, it's turned green. What does that mean, Graham? So yeah, I don't think you want me getting a 3D printer.
Yeah, it's just because I just got this 3D printer last week. I went on the main place to get minis from 3D printing files. And you and I were talking about the bits for Terraforming Mars. And I thought, I don't think I have very much desire to print out board gaming stuff. And then it kind of got me thinking about the minis of since I already have invested in the 3D printer, which version would I rather have? Since I already have the infrastructure to build to print them myself, I think I would still prefer to have the ones that are produced by CMON as opposed to the ones I do myself.
Yeah, I think it's again, I think it's any type of hobby. I know with like miniature wargaming, there are people that they like to make all their own terrain themselves. And even some of, back in the day, making your own miniatures, casting your own lead miniatures at home was a very popular thing, making your own molds. And I had a buddy, he had his own like studio where he would make all these resin pieces of terrain and he would sell them. But I'm thinking, God, this is like a toxic nightmare you've got going on in this part of your house. Um, but some people just really they enjoy the crafting part of it, and then being able to put it out on the table and use it. I guess just makes it better for them. I was always what you consider to be a in the miniature wargaming world like a terrain whore because I love buying terrain. But I like buying terrain that is generally built, painted, flocked. Yes, I'm paying way too much for it, but it's ready to go
Right.
because I don't enjoy making it. I don't feel like I have the time to dedicate to making it. So when I would buy, I'd buy these cornfields, and yes, I know you could make them at home, and they're time intensive, but mine were ready to go. I just open up the box, I put them down, I can move them around. Boom, I've got my cornfield on my field.
Oh no, you
And
sat back in your chair and went, Jeeves, open up my
let's
terrain
try,
for me.
let's try. Set up my cornfield in a 4x4 pattern. So one of the things that I never bought, which I probably talked about, so the Zulu War Works Drift is like it's one of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite time periods. It's one of my favorite battles. It was the first army that I ever got into, miniature wise. And a few years ago, Warlord Games, who we were running demos for, they had a boxed set they had the Rorke's Drift mission, and it came with all the miniatures. I didn't need the miniatures. I just wanted the mission because it was one of the coolest things. But I thought, okay, but I want it ready to go out of the box. So if I buy it, like it was going to be $200 just to buy all the terrain, then I would have to have someone. But it was like for 28 millimeter scale. It had the different buildings, like 3 or 4 different buildings, had all the walls. It had teddy bear fur for the thatched roofs. I mean, it was spectacular. And I thought, man, I want that so bad. I would want that built, and I would just want to sit it on a table, put a glass case over it. And everyone's like, why would you buy that? Because I mean, how many times are you ever going to play the same battle over and over again? Because it is a set piece battle. It's and so I never ended up buying it. But I thought, you know what, that would be the one thing that I'd probably splurge on. That and maybe like someone had a really big mock-up of like one of the bridges for Market Garden. Those are the types of I mean, the reason that I was called a terrain horse because I would spend the money on that just because even if I know it's just going to do 1 or 2 battles on it. But yeah, making it myself, printing it out, no, I have I have zero desire to do any of that. Any model I ever made as a kid, I set it on fire because I like to watch the world burn, Graham. But anyways, I don't even know how we got on that topic, but you and your 3D printing.
Yep.
So you're gonna be. Did you ever watch the movie? What was it called? Weird Science.
Mhm.
That's what you're shooting for, right? You're trying to make yourself a woman out of your resin bits.
I'm not sure my wife would appreciate that.
Well, I'm not saying she had to know, but if you've got 8 3D printers fired up in your basement or whatever, she might start to suspect something.
It's very true.
No. All right. Well, besides all your 3D printing, have you got any games played?
You're asking me whether I got any games played.
Well, I don't know if you got any games played. I
I
mean,
got
you're not a real gamer like me.
I did get two. I've got a couple games played, but there's two I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
So the first one is actually an old game that came out in 2011.
Hmm.
And it's been a long time since I played it because I've been playing some of his more recent stuff a lot more regularly. And this is Castles of Burgundy by Stefan Phelp. I had not played Castles of Burgundy in probably about 4 years. And Lil and I were looking for something to play. And I brought up Castles of Burgundy and the Russian Railroads because I haven't played Russian Railroads in a long time either. I was like, oh, yeah, let's play Castles of Burgundy. as much as I love Feld, I know people love Castles of Burgundy. Neither one of us loved Castles of Burgundy, and we played it. I think we ended up playing it 3 times in one day. Um, and I think for me, it's the dice. It's the dice rolling, and maybe it's because it has been such a long time since I played it. And if you talk about people who love Feld, they'll often say Castles of Burgundy is my favorite, or I don't like Feld, but I do like Castles of Burgundy. So it kind of gets put on a pedestal. I mean, it's ranked 15th overall on Board Game Geek. So there's a lot of people who love this game. I don't hate the game, but it's definitely not one of my favorite Felds. If you don't know Castles of Burgundy, it's played over, I forget how many rounds, 6 rounds, 5 rounds, something like that. Each round is going to be phases. Each phase, you're going to be rolling 2 dice. And there are 6 spots on the board. And depending what die you roll, when you take an action, that's the die value that you need to take. And your actions are going to be like taking hexes from the main board into your storage, or moving them from the storage onto your little player board. Your little player board is going to be broken up to different areas. Like there's going to be a river, there's going to be grasslands or farmlands. There's going to be places to build your castles. There's going to be, I forget what the yellow ones are. Different colors on your boards will take one specific type of tile. And when you complete an area, you can score points for it. Some of the yellow tiles are going to give you end of game scoring. But it's all about this rolling your dice, taking the tiles that you need, and then getting them onto your board and scoring points. I found that often you'd roll dice and you had nothing to do with them. It's like, well, especially later on in the round, you're like, well, I've rolled 3s like for the first 3 goes of this round. 3s are completely empty. There's nothing left for me to take. So I'm going to use my 3 and get, I think it's 1 worker or 2 workers or something like that. So you're essentially just throwing your dice away. And I found, because I needed like whatever, a sheep or whatever else, so it could be one of the tiles on the board, I roll my 2 dice. 1 die I'm literally throwing away to get the workers for it, because the workers allow you to manipulate the values on another die. So like I'm just using 1 die to get workers so I can manipulate the die on the other one. So I basically only have 1 action that I'm doing for my 2 dice. And it just felt that I don't know, I didn't enjoy it. And the same thing happened to Lella. We both had games where we just couldn't roll the dice that we needed, and we were just taking 1 action per turn, because the other action was basically, you're taking it, but you're throwing it away just to get workers so you can manipulate the die, so you can actually take an action that you could use. That we both kind of went, it doesn't feel as good as I was hoping it to feel. Still a really good game. Still one I would happily sit down and play. But if you ask me, where does, like, is Castles of Burgundy your favorite Feld game? It's like, no, it's definitely in my top
15.
I was going to say 5, and I think I don't even know whether it'd be in my top 5 Felds. Maybe just outside my top 5 Felds, because it's still enjoyable. I still like the puzzle of getting the pieces that you put into your storage and then have to get them on your board, and kind of getting that and trying to be the first one to complete all your farms, because you get a big bonus for that. And I like playing on the side where everybody's different. Like your board setup's different. So I enjoyed that. It's like there's a lot of good things, but that dice mechanism just didn't sit right with neither one of us. So it was like, I'm glad I got it back to the table, but it was a little disappointing, mainly because I hold Stefan Feld games in such high regards that I want them all to be, knocking out of the park on every single time I play them. And this one just didn't. So that was one of my plays for this was Castles of Burgundy by Stefan Feld.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Do you think it was a disappointment because it's a Feld and that you're judging everything based off of it's a Feld? Because I think Castles of Burgundy, so I haven't officially played the physical copy. I've only messed around with it online through the Steam version. And it's never one that, like, it's not one where I want to sit down and play it over and over and over again on it. To me, it's kind of like it's kind of an intro Feld, kind of I guess, call it whatever, a gateway feld sort of thing.
Yep.
And I think the reason it's so popular is because it's dice, and dice are extremely popular. Um, dice rolling mechanism is very popular for most gamers because I think because of the randomness and the how it levels the playing field for so many gamers. Um, and think of it. I'm not saying Castles of Burgundy is like Splendor, but think about Splendor. Splendor is a very simple game, but man, is it widely loved. I mean, it is like you talk. I mean, if you bring it up, I mean, 9 people out of 10 are just like gaga about it. And I think Castles of Burgundy is the same way. So I don't know how much of it is because people love it, or they think they should love it because everyone else loves it and because it's a Feld. But I think for, you know, again, it's not a bad game, but I think if you are truly a diehard Feld fan like yourself, whereas, it's Trajan and, um,
Bonfire.
Bonfire. Did he do Bora Bora too?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, so, I mean, those types of games, I mean, clearly it's not in the same weight class as those games. And you tend to like the game, heavier games anyway. So I could see where, it probably isn't going to make you jump up and down and clap that it's coming to the table. But I think it's also one of those, because it is dice, not every game is going to be one where you're going to experience what you guys did with
Yeah.
not having, with having just some bad distributions of the dice rolling. So yeah, it's one I'd like to play, the physical copy. Not that I think it's going to play any different than the online, but you know, just to say that I have. All right. Well, my game is one where it's kind of similar as far as how I feel about it. And I know I've played it before, but it's been a long time ago. And I think I talked about it not as a first bite. Somehow I know I talked about this game over the course of one of the podcast episodes with you, comparing it probably to something else. But it's a card game, it's a trick taking game, and it's called Nyet. Nyet is, well, the version I have is a yellow version. I don't know who puts it out now, if they're still the one putting it out. This is a game that came out in like 1996, 97, something like that. And it's had a lot of different publishers. It is designed by Stefan Dora. And it's a trick taking game, but it's one of those trick taking games where there's a little bit of stuff going on in it. And I think that's, for me, that's where it kind of loses the allure of being a good trick taking game. I'm not saying it's a bad one. I'm just saying it can, well, I'll explain more later. So, and yet you can play at 3 to 5 players. Probably plays best at 4. But before you ever sit down and start playing your hand, playing for your tricks, every round starts with people taking their different tokens, and you're going to be covering up spaces on this little game board in front of you. And the game board's going to have pictures of all the different players. It's going to have what is going to be Trump. It's going to have what is going to be Super Trump. It's going to have how many cards you can potentially discard or not discard before you start playing. And I think it's going to have a row for what everything scores, or how many points each trick scores. And so everyone's going to take a turn. It's going to go around a circle, and you're going to take one of your tokens. You're going to cover up stuff that you don't want to be used that round. And you're going to do this based off of the fact that you know what your hand is. So if you look and you see, oh, I don't have any blue cards, then you probably want to cover up blue as being Trump, because that's not going to help you. And everyone's going to keep going around and around until there's only one space left in each of those rows. And it's going to determine first player, Trump, Super Trump, so on and so forth. You're then going to play the round. But before you play the round, whoever is designated as being first player, say it's me, I'm going to decide who I want my partner to be. It doesn't have to be the person across the table, and be any of the other players. So say I want Graham to be my partner. So then we're going to work together to win the different tricks. And we're both going to score exactly the same number of points at the end of the round, because we're partners. Doesn't matter how many tricks he wins or I win. And so that's how you're going to play your round. And it plays very much the same as, okay, if I lead out with a green 8, then you have to follow suit if you can. and you got to beat my 8 in order to win the trick. The super trump is a little bit of a twist in that the super trump, it's the color and it's the number one card out of that is the same color. So if super trump is a red 1, then that now trumps anything else that's put out there. So there's a little bit of twist in that. You're going to play a number of rounds based off of how many players there are. And I can't remember if it's double of what it is. If it's 4 players, if it's 8 rounds, or maybe it's just 4 rounds. I can't remember exactly, which it's going to change based on the player count. If you play less than 4 players, if you play 3 players, or if you play 5 players, whoever gets stuck going alone gets a ×2 card, meaning every trick they win is actually worth 2 tricks. So it kind of helps balance it out. And then you're going to play the number of rounds. Whoever has the most points is going to win. Some of the things that I do like about it is that there is some strategy in that as the game goes along, if I see that Graham is kind of close to me in points, then I probably don't want to pick him as my partner. If I think I'm going to score a lot of tricks, I don't want to pick him as my partner because I don't want him getting the same number of points. So I may purposely pick somebody else that's in dead last, knowing that, hey, I'm looking at my hand, I'll probably take 5 tricks myself, sort of thing. So there's some strategy in that. And there's definitely strategy in looking at your hand and covering up certain things. You can't always prevent someone from covering up something that's going to benefit you. That's just kind of how the game plays. So it is interesting. But here's the downside to it. For a trick-taking game, it's pretty convoluted as far as trying to not necessarily explain it to people, but for them to grasp the strategies of how they want to cover stuff up. If you're playing with really experienced trick-taking players, probably not as hard. But if you're introducing this to people that are new to trick-taking and you're throwing in all these things of, okay, now you get to kind of, what do you think you want to have trump? And, and sometimes it's just, it might benefit me, but I might be looking at my card and say, gosh, if I've got 8 green and someone else has probably got 8 yellow. So I definitely want to maybe, whatever. There's all this, different strategy. So it's not a simple game to get people to understand the strategies and who they want to pick as a partner. And, one of the things you're going to pick is how many cards you want to discard. You can discard 1 card, 2 cards, no cards, 1 card and pass it to the left, or no cards and pass it. I don't know, whatever that is. So, I mean, there's like 5 choices for each of the different things. So it's not the easiest game to get people to grasp. And for me, that's where it kind of loses it. If I'm going to play a trick-taking game, this would not be one of the first ones I would ever pull out to introduce anyone to, for sure. And I'm not sure that I would pull it out over probably 5 or 6 others. I do enjoy it, but it's got its place and time. Kind of like a Castles of Burgundy. I don't think I turned down a play of it, but the longer I've had it, sometimes when people, if I think about it, I'm like, I don't know if I want to try to explain all that. Let's just play, let's play diamonds, or something else. So that is Nyet currently by Yellow. At least the copy I have is by Yellow Games.
Yeah, I remember when the yellow version came out. That's the first time I had heard of Nyet, but I know it is a much older game than that. I liked the idea, but it's like, oh man, you'd really want to have people that were very experienced with trick taking because you're adding a whole other level of meta thinking about the game.
Yeah.
So I've never purchased it because I didn't have that many other people that really like trick taking games and were willing to kind of add one more level to trick taking. So it's unfortunate. I would like to try it, but I think I'm going to have to probably play with you type thing.
Yeah, and it's one where you can play at 3 players, which is nice. But there's Chimera, which is a 3-player trick-taking game, which is pretty good. If I've got 4 players, well, I'm always going to try to get Chichu to the table instead, or even 3 players with diamonds. And at 5 players, God, I don't know if I'd want to. It's bad not trying to explain it to 3 players or 4. I guess 5 doesn't make a difference. But like I said, it's not going to be my go-to game at any player count,
Right.
which is, kind of bad.
So my second game is a new one. It's a 2-player only game called Botanic, Botanik. It's put out by Space, but it's put out by Space Cowboys, but on their 2-player only line. So it is a 2-player only game. It's got very weird art to it, and it's a, I was going to call it an abstract strategy game. It's not, though, because there's a fair bit of randomness to it. The point of the game is that you are 2 scientists kind of competing over to make the best mechanical botanic garden. And essentially, it's, if you ever played the game Tiles on the PC or on your phone, when you have the little tiles that you're trying to get water to run from one side of the board to the other side of the board, move the tiles or rotate the tiles. That's essentially what this game is. So there's a player board between the 2 players, and there's a stack of 62 tiles. Same 62 tiles in every game, 62, 64, so whatever it is. You lay the first 5 out to the middle of the board. This is I forget what it's called, the resource row or something like that. And both players start with the source, which would be, if you think about the game on the PC or whatever else, that's where the water starts from. On your turn, you're going to be, then there's also 3 tiles turned face up, kind of beside the board. So you have 5 down the middle of the board and then 3 face up on the side. Who's ever the first player for the round is going to take one of the 3 tiles, and they have 2 options for it. They can either put it on their side of the board. So there are 5 tiles that are in the middle of the board, and then both sides will have 5 empty slots on either side. You can put it on an empty slot on your side of the board as long as it matches one thing with the tile that it's right above it in the center of the board. So it either has to match the same color or it has to be the same type of pipe. So you place that on your side of the board. So not in your connection yet, like not in your pipe connection, but just on your side of the board. The other option is to take the tile that you've taken, instead of placing it on your side of the board, you place it on one of the 5 stacks in the middle. If you place it on the stack in the middle, if someone has a tile on their side that no longer matches the tile you place on top, they get to take the tile off and add it to their connections. When you're adding tiles to your pipe works, common sense. If there's a pipe on one side of the tile, it has to match to a pipe on the other side of the tile. If there's no pipe, you can only match to no pipe. Very basic things. The goal of the game is to basically have a large connected pipeworks all of the same color. So the larger, and there's 5 colors of these tiles. 5, 6, I think it's 5 tiles, 5 colors. So you want to, if I'm collecting red tiles, I want to have a large series of red tiles that are all connected to each other, because you only score points if the connected run of a single color is 3 or more. So if I start from my source and I go red and then I go black and then go blue and then go red again, those 2 reds don't matter for anything. I'd have to get red, 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 red to start to score some points. The other thing is there are little flowers on some of these pipe tiles. And when those get added to your connections, at the end of the game, any flower that you can trace it back to your main source will score points. So that's all you're doing on your turn. Taking one of the face-up tiles and either placing it on your side if it matches one of the tiles in the middle, either by color or by shape, or placing it in the middle, and then you can have 0, 1, or 2 tiles come off the board that time. So if you place it and it still matches both sides, or there's nothing on either side, basically you're just throwing the tile away. Ideally what you want to do is you want to place a tile in the middle where it matches your opponent's side, but doesn't match your side. Or because you want to be adding stuff to your network, because the larger your network is, and the larger, more red ones I can get together, the bigger score is. And if I can stop you from placing let's say you're collecting blue and black. If I can stop you from getting those tiles into your thing, then hopefully I can get more points. It's kind of an odd game because there are 5 colors. What happened very quickly was we essentially split the colors. Lola started collecting yellow and red, and I went, okay, I'll collect blue and green tiles. Sometimes you'd have 3 red come up. So what happens is it goes first player, second player, first player. That will get rid of all the 3 tiles that are laid out. Then you lay out another 3 tiles, and then the other player's first player. So every 3 turns, there's going to be another 3 tiles placed out. But it kind of felt at the end of the game when there was some strategy to saying, oh, I see you're collecting red tiles. So I'm gonna take if there's no tiles that I really want or no tiles I can place, but there's a tile that you need, I'm gonna take it and put it in the middle. Because it's you can never get the tiles from the middle section. Once they're placed there, they're essentially out of the game. There is if you get one of the scientists, and there's 1 scientist per color, if that comes off your side of the board, you can swap it for one of the top tiles of the middle row. But it's don't rely on that type of thing. Or you try to get someone to release a tile from their side that they can't use yet. Let's say Lela says, okay, I have most of the red ones there. I know I've run through almost all the red tiles in the 2 decks. Therefore, I'm going to start on blue. So I'm going to take a blue and put it on my side, but I still have 2 red on my side. If I can force her to take the blue one off and try and disrupt her series of red, there's some strategy there. But some of the tiles will have 2 or 3 or 4 pipes coming out of them. So it never seemed to work. It just seemed to be, I'm getting the blue and green ones, and you're getting the red and yellow ones, and we're essentially using the black ones to throw in the middle. And if there's no tiles for me to take that I could use, I was just getting rid of her tiles. So I know it's a light game. It's a weight of 2. And it was kind of enjoyable for a while, but it got very samey very quickly. And I don't know whether we're missing something from the game, but it was just it was very obvious what you should do. There wasn't a lot of, now which tile should I take? It's fairly obvious. If I'm collecting blue and there's a blue one out there and there's a blue space, like there's an empty space on my side that can go, I'm putting it there. If I can't take any tiles, then I'm going to try and get rid of your tiles. Like it was very that kind of obvious. There was very little time when you're going, oh, 3 turns, I'm going to pull off this magical move. It's like, no, you see the tiles, you know exactly what to do with the tiles. There's no hidden information. The other person's kind of looking at the tiles going, exactly the same thing I'm saying. If I can't use any of the tiles, I'm just going to try and burn through his tiles so he can't add them to his connection. So in that sense, it felt a very basic game. And that's not a bad thing, because this would be something you could easily sit down with a non-gamer and play. But for, I'll call both Lil and I gamers, because we do enjoy playing games. I can't see myself going back to this because it really didn't offer anything beyond that. But I would suggest, like Dean, with your wife, with Amy, because she's not a huge gamer, this would be a very easy one that you could teach to her. It's enjoyable. It's over in 20 minutes. That it might be just the right weight for her. Or if you have I would say like a tween kid who's just getting into gaming, this would be a great one for that type of thing. But I can't see this one being great for serious hobby gamers, because it did feel like it was missing a level of strategy that I want even in this style of game. I felt like it was very, very obvious what you should be doing with your tiles. So like I said, it's kind of a lukewarm game. I could see some people enjoying it, but for myself, it's one I think I'm going to pass on it. So that's Botanique. Not sure. It's a combination of robotic and biology. So whatever. Mm-hmm. It's got 3 designers for it. I'm not exactly sure why, because I found it a pretty straightforward game. Again, I've only played it once. Maybe I'm missing a level of complexity, but I wasn't feeling it.
Well,
Yeah, so I mean, it looks cool. I mean, I'm looking at the graphics. I like the graphic design of it, and I like the artwork. But when you were talking about how, since it's a two-player game, and you would tend to go for the red and the yellow, and Lo would go for green and blue, whatever. To me, that's almost how every two-player game of this type, of a tile laying pattern, whatever this is, pattern selection style game. It seems very seems like that always tends to be the case, especially when there's an even number of things to choose from. It would almost be better if there was only three colors, so you're kind of forced to fight over at least one of them. Um,
You also play with all the tiles every game. So
yeah,
if you shuffled them all up and took a random 10 out, that way you wouldn't know which one's which. So
well, but
for
again,
me,
that goes into the fact that we're trying to make it more of a game than what it's
yes,
designed to be. I mean,
yes.
not more of a game, but more of a heavier game, more strategic game than what it's designed to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, depending on what the price point was or whatever, I mean, I could see. I mean, I have a lot of two-player games that are good for, you know, um, a less immersive, or a lighter style of game. So I don't know if I'd ever run out and seek it out, but I
Now,
could see if you were looking for a specific type, yeah, this would probably work.
and it's odd because I bought this game at my local game store. I wasn't looking for it. It was there, so I decided to pick it up. And I got the box that said limited edition. It's like I didn't pick the limited edition. I don't know whether it's the only edition that's available. But the first player marker is, what is that, 2 inches? And it's about 2 inches tall and maybe about half an inch, 3/4 of an inch wide. It's like this sun shape, and it's made of metal. It's
Hmm.
really, really nice. And it comes with a metal coin. So the first player markers, it goes back and forth between the players, just so you remember who's going to be picking the first tile out of the three when they're turned face up. The coin isn't used for anything. It's not mentioned in the rule book. And they made a big thing. Oh, limited edition coin. It's like, okay, it says Botnik on one side, and it's got another picture on the other side. We just use it to flip to see who went first. Like it's like
Maybe it's a challenge coin.
yeah. I'm looking at it going, it's fine, but I hope that didn't put up the cost of the game by a couple bucks, because it's absolutely useless and it's never mentioned as a like it's not even like an optional variant.
Well, isn't Space Cowboys part of Asmodee? So
Yes.
maybe that's just their way of driving the price up a little
Yeah.
higher. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, if I was looking at the game, I would assume the price point has got to be less than $30.
Yeah, it was. I think it was like low 20s,
Yeah,
something like that, mid 20s, something like that. So, and it's a relatively small box too. Like if the tiles are kind of that big square, so they're small tiles. So yeah, it's 25 bucks.
yeah. The box cover, the lady's kind of freaky. Why does she have four arms?
Yeah, the whole art's like that. It is kind of weird art.
Yeah, whatever. Okay. Well, I haven't even seen that out of the stores, so I'll I'll wait to get your copy. All right, so I think that's going to wrap up our first bites. And we've been doing some top five lists for a long time: top five, top three, top tens, and we were kind of back off on them for a little while, just to do something new. And one of the reasons is because we felt like we were always going to the same games over and over again. At least that's kind of what it felt like. And maybe listeners felt like it the same way, not just in our top five list, but also maybe in our discussions. But Graham has suggested that we do a top five list of games that we are going to send to the vault, or games that we're going to classify as secret recipes that we're never going to speak of again, at least for the next year. So these are games I thought that we would pick. I will pick them for Graham. Graham will pick them for me. And these are games that can no longer appear in our top five lists. So Graham, let me ask you this. If and you said let's do five. I think I settled on three because, I mean, let's not be super punishing to ourselves. Um, so these are just games that we can't put on top five lists. We can still, like, if they come up in conversation, we can still say their name. They're not like, I mean, they're not like Voldemort's where we can't utter the name. And we could still like maybe use them as an example.
Yeah. So I will tell you the one of the main reasons for this is because the last top five we did, I forget what it was. I was saying, I was going through my top five list and kind of went, well, this game is obvious, like an obvious choice for it. But I always talk about it. But if this is our top five list, these are our favorite games that do this thing. I think it was the dice rolling one. You know, as much as I love Lobotomy, I think it's a fantastic game. So if you ask me about dice rolling, I'm going to bring up Lobotomy. But then I thought, that's really kind of, if I take it as what is your favorite game that has this mechanism in it, then my favorite games will repeatedly come up on those lists. So I said, what is a way that we can get through that and recognize that these are our favorite games, but pick games that maybe people haven't heard of as much, like maybe your second or third favorite one, as opposed to always your first favorite one. I was thinking, well, should our top fives be outside of our top 100 games? You know, just some way to bring in new games that we can talk about that we wouldn't normally talk about, because we always assume that we should be looking at our favorite games that do this. So then I came up with this vault idea of saying, why don't we take a certain number of games and just put them in the vault? And that gives us a chance to talk about different games on our top five list. So if I said, you know, let's do top five card games. Well, you know, Dean loves Arkham Horror LCG, but I'm sure there's other ones he likes too that never got a chance to be on the list because we're saying that. But you know, that type of idea. So that's why I got thinking about this, because of specifically the last time we did a top five. I was thinking I would like to talk about other games, but if I like this game more than that game, I can't put that other game on the list. So
should this be a vault, or should this just be a top five in memoriam? they're dead to you now.
We could do like the Disney Vault. You know, bring it out every couple of years.
This game won't come back until 2022. All right. So do you want to do 3 or 5?
I have 6 for you, so I'm okay with either one.
I was having a hard time coming up with 3 for you.
Oh, first 2 were like that. I knew your first 2.
Well, I mean, sure. Okay, let's do 5. All right, you want to be a jerk about it? Let's do 5. All right. They definitely do this one. And definitely that one. It's been kind of sad. I won't get you hear you talk about some of these games anymore. And I'll think about the 4th one as we go. And I would doubt there's going to be any crossover.
No, I don't think so.
So that was one of the nice things about when we would do the drafts, is because then you're not getting any crossover at all. Which I don't know how many of our drafts had like our go-to games on there. I'm sure there were probably a couple, but okay. Well, why don't you, since this was your idea, I'll let you go first.
Okay. Well, my honorable mention. So my number 6. So you're still allowed to talk about these games, or have these on your list. I just had Anything Pfister.
Oh, you were gonna deny me every Pfister game possible.
So that's why it's the number 6. So it's not on the list. So my number 5 is more for a personal reason. And you do bring it up, not as much as some of the other ones, but my number 5 for you to put in the vault, so I don't have to hear you talking about it in any top 5s, is Lorenzo Il Magnifico.
Oh, the gloves are off, my friend. That's just because you don't like the game. You don't understand it. You don't understand how to roll dice. Okay, Lorenzo. I'm just writing this down so I'll know to, make a big cue card to tape up on my computer saying you cannot speak.
Lorenzo, no.
Il Magnifico. Okay. All right. So my number 5, and this may be one that maybe I just think that we may both use it too much, but I know when we talk about family weight games and set collection games, this one always seems to be one that you like to play, even though you play it dirty. But that's going to be Ticket to Ride.
I thought you might put that one on the list. Boy, this hurts.
It does. This is not only one. This is kind of like a double edged, like, we can't use on top five list, but then it also makes you think, like, start to self analyze, like, oh my god, do I really talk about that game too much?
But in some ways, it's like I'm thinking of this as like a refreshing thing. That
Right.
And again, it kind of forces us to kind of go outside of our comfort zone and look at more games to, because we want to be introducing people to maybe games they haven't heard of. And I do talk about Ticket to Ride a lot. So maybe next week when we can do a top 5 family weight set collection game, see what I come up with.
Well, I guess periodically we're going to have to we'll have to either pin it to the Facebook page or remind people periodically in the podcast that if they say, why don't you guys ever talk about, I can't believe you didn't mention Ticket to Ride and whatever, it is banned. It's in the vault. Okay.
So my number 4 for you is, actually, this is another game I'm not a big fan of, but I know you love the trader, the quasi trader, and that's going to be Dead of Winter. Whenever we talk about the hidden trader or that whole semi co-op, this comes up a lot. Okay, these start off with 2 games I don't really enjoy, but I know you do. My 3 above are ones that we both like. So I'm not just picking the games I don't like.
All right. So my number 4 for you is going to be a game that I do like. I've only played it once, but you already alluded to it before. And that is going to be your go-to, even though I think you'll just screw me over and you will talk about Zombicide instead, but I'm going to put Lobotomy on your vault list. And I hope to God that doesn't mean you're going to talk about Zombicide, because I hate that game.
That one doesn't surprise me. I knew that I used Lobotomy an awful lot. And again, it's one of my favorite games. So you'd expect me, under the regulations of a podcast, when you're doing a top 5, they should be the games that you like the best that use that mechanism. So,
well, especially in a mechanism that you're not a super big fan of, you're only going to have so many games that you probably come to the forefront of your mind. So okay.
So my number 3 for you is a game that you used to talk about an awful lot even before I got on the podcast. And then you did kind of put it to bed for a while, but I noticed one of the most recent top 5 lists, it popped up again.
Don't you do it.
This is Affliction Salem 1692.
I was good. I weaned myself off of that game because I was accused of talking about it all the time. I mentioned it one time in the last year. Okay, that's fine. We'll burn that one. All right, so my number 3 for you is going to be a game that I've only played it once. None that I disliked or that I liked it. There was a lot going on, and it's one of your favorite games, and it was definitely at a disadvantage. And you do seem to talk about it quite a bit when we talk about card games and chaining cards, and you like to play your bloop, 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 as you would say, and that is going to be Race for the Galaxy.
Okay.
I was going to put Magic the Gathering just so you couldn't always say, why would I play that? I just play Magic the Gathering instead.
I never put Magic the Gathering on top 5 lists.
I know, but that's always your default. Well, I mean, in all honesty, nothing's better than Magic there. So I went with Race for the Galaxy.
Okay. So number 2 is,
now, if you want to talk about Roll for the Galaxy, feel free.
No, it's okay.
I know how much
that will not be on any of my top 5 lists.
Okay. All right.
So my number 2 for you is a game that I have played once with you. And I specifically asked to play this game with you because I played it twice. First time I didn't really enjoy it, but I know how much you enjoyed it. So I said, I want to play this game with you to see what I'm missing for this game.
Oh my God, you're not. You're you're gonna hit me with two
Maybe
Lovecraftian games.
I am. So
Oh my,
number 2 is Eldritch Horror.
oh my God, this podcast is over. Sorry. You know what all this is going to do is force me to go out and play more Cthulhu games.
That's fine. I have nothing majorly against Cthulhu games, but it seems to be you have 2 default Cthulhu games. Like what about Death May Die? You haven't talked about the
I haven't
Maxi
played it.
Mini.
I haven't played it, but I'm going to now, and I'm going to bring it up in every game because it's Cthulhu and it's Lang just for you. Now, we should do a top 5 designers that are banned that we're sending to the vault.
No,
we'll have no one to talk about. All right. So my number 2, man, you are hitting hard. I'm not sure that I've really hit you that hard, like with games that you enjoy that much. I guess I'm a nicer person. Anyways, all right. So my number 2 for you is going to be a game that well, let's just face it, it's your go-to Phelp, my friend. And when you talk about Euro games and point salads,
I didn't put any Pfister games on this list.
But you do talk about this game a lot.
Don't you dare touch it.
But Phelp. You do talk about it a lot. That is Trajan.
Oh.
You got plenty of other Euro games to pick.
That hurts. My number 1 game. And
well, Eldritch Horror was my number 1 game for years until last year. So the number 1 game you're not allowed to talk about is no. I just can't have it in a top 5 list.
Yes, not in top 5 list.
So we're gonna have a whole new segment, Card Game Corner,
and they're not allowed to be your honorable mentions either.
Oh,
okay. Like top 5 Hamming games. Well, my honorable mention for this one is Arkham Horror and Eldritch.
I can't help but think that this was all brought about by a certain person named Ian putting into the back of your mind that I talk about Arkham Horror too much.
No, it literally was the last top 5 that we did.
That was your breaking point when I talked about it.
No, and it wasn't like I'm getting tired of this. It was more of I had a hard time justifying not putting it on the list. Like I felt that I had to put it on the list because of how much I enjoy the game. But I also felt our listeners are always hearing the same thing. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe people like to hear the same game. So I thought, my number 6, if I got rid of my number 1 game, that brings everything up. So now you get to hear a new game. And I felt that I was repeatedly going back to the well because they were my favorite games and they worked well with them, whatever we were talking about. So they kept on coming up and up and up. And I kind of felt at that time, it was like, maybe I should be putting different games on the list. But then am I being disingenuous if I'm not putting my favorite game on the list? So
yeah, I mean, I think I tried to, over the last several lists to try to put new stuff on there to try not to do the same old all the time. And even with not including any war games or anything like that on some of the lists. So I get what you're saying. So your number 1 pick for me was
I thought you were
Magic the Gathering again.
I thought you were dancing around, and so I didn't have to say no. My number 1 game for you is Arkham Horror, the living card game.
Okay. Well, we'll see. This is going to be tough. All right.
So that was a good top 5 list. So what's next?
So the number 1 game for you is again, it's not even the fact that I've never played it and I've been told I'm never going to get to play it. But it does make a lot of your lists. Again, you can still talk about it all you want in side discussions with other people other than me. But yeah, I think it's going to have to be the only splotter that you ever talk about. And that is Food Chain Magnate.
I was just, as you were talking about that, I already wrote Food Chain Magnate as you started talking. It's like, oh yeah, it's probably going to do Food Chain Magnate. That
was actually the very first one that came to my mind when I started making the list.
But as we were talking about that, the other one that both you and I have put on our list an awful lot is Antiquity.
Yeah, and I didn't think that, I wasn't sure if you'd put it on my list. I don't think you talk about it nearly as much as I do. I know you enjoy it, but usually it seems like I'm the one who's always bringing up Antiquity.
Right.
because I mean, Food Chain is it's kind of your go-to sort of super heavy, you know, economic game, splatter game,
Yeah.
underproduced game, your favorite expansion, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure if our listeners say, "Hey, I can't believe you didn't bring up this game because my God, you talk about it a lot. You should put this one in there as well." Feel free to suggest it. Maybe if there needs to be additions, there needs to be addition. I mean, I could have easily, or you could have easily, because I think I bring it up more. You could have brought up Subterra because I think there for a while we were talking about Subterra quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe someone could even say London. London second edition. I mean, we don't talk about as much it now, but there for a while, we talked about it pretty incessantly. And quite frankly, one that I can't believe that you didn't bring up was Teach You.
I was tempted, but that has not appeared on an awful lot of top 5 lists.
No, but if it's anything to do with cards or trick taking or partners or whatever, then it definitely would be one. But I mean, if you can't eliminate everything, but the positive way of looking at this is, yes, they're going to go to the vault and we're going to introduce different games because of that. But it also just tells you how much we really enjoy these games as well. So if you haven't tried any of these games, depending on what your style is, you may want to check out one of these 10 games that's headed off to the vault. And like a Disney princess will reappear somewhere down the road. We're cryogenically freezing them.
Yeah, and I hope people understand the reasoning why we're doing this is because we want to, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm approaching top 5 lists incorrectly, but I always looked at top 5 lists that you should start with your favorite games that have whatever topic we're talking about, and those are the ones that should be on your list. But that also means you're only talking about a small portion of the games out there. And I wanted to try and make the top 5 lists more of, here are some really good games that have whatever doing the top 5 on. They may not be my favorite games because my favorite games are now in the vault. But here are some other games that if you're interested in that, that maybe you haven't heard of, maybe that one of them might intrigue you. Because if you hear, my incessant nattering on about lobotomy, I'm sure any of the listeners on this listening to the podcast know what lobotomy is. They don't need to hear me talking about it anymore. If you haven't tried it already, based on what I've said, me putting another top 5 list isn't going to change your mind, but maybe there's something else that I could put in its place that may intrigue you, which is why I want to kind of get these out of the way and say, yes, Dean and I recognize that we really enjoy these games. Let's talk about the next set of games.
Yeah. I understand how you approach the top 5. I mean, I do try to change it up a little bit, although I mean, my the number of games that I've played pales in comparison to the number of games that you play. But I would also think that if you approach it the way you do, so let's say we did top 5 lists of top 5 games with this mechanism or this mechanism or this mechanism. Well, unless it's a weird mechanism, you're probably not going to get out of your top 10 ever, because so many games have multiple mechanisms that are being used. I mean, you'd have the same top 5 lists, maybe in a slightly different order, but even that shouldn't vary. I mean, if you're making a top 5 list, I mean, it pretty much should go in the pecking order of your top 10 if it qualified. So
yeah, and maybe that's something we consider. That would our listeners like top 5 lists or a list of 5 games that have that topic in it?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's just kind of like what we do with if you like this, you may like that.
Yeah.
Again, this is another reason we talked about kind of weaning off of some top 5 lists, maybe dropping them down to top 3 lists, or just not doing them every episode, because sometimes they do become samey. But anyways, please give us any input that you have. We could be totally off our rockers at this point in time, and you may say, no, please don't change it. We need more Arkham Horror LCG in our lives. Yeah, and we thought this was a dedicated podcast.
If anybody writes in and writes like Arkham Horror LC what?
So on a side note, I have a question. So one of the podcasts that was nominated for the was it Golden Geek, BGG's,
Yeah.
whatever it is. I just happened to glance through it, and because I'd never heard of it, I'm like, what is this? So it appears to be a podcast dedicated to just Twilight Imperium 4.
Really?
And it got me thinking, well, one, I mean, it must have a very dedicated fan base. I mean, obviously, but it got me thinking, like, I don't think I would, I mean, I've never listened to a podcast that is dedicated to just one game. Now, I've downloaded some that are just specific to Arkham Horror LCG, but I've never like made it through a full episode of any of them, because after a while it's like, yeah, whatever, let's go, let's move on. And I just wonder how many of our listeners actually, I mean, is that something that appeals? I mean, not that we have any intention of doing anything like that, because we neither one of us immerse ourselves into a lifestyle game of that nature. I guess, there are just some games that have really fanatical base, and their people just devour the content, I guess. I mean, I don't know how many different things you can talk about a game, but
Yeah, I'm also thinking that if you had a good orator or someone that could tell a good story over, because it is a fairly thematic game. It's a big, grandiose, there's lots of happening, there's backstabbing and the wars, that if you had someone that was good at doing recaps of games that was entertaining, it'd be like listening to, the next series in a book, essentially. So I could see if that's the way it was. Again, I haven't listened to it, so I don't know what it is, but I could see that if it was doing game recaps of epic TI4 games, and you had someone that was really good at that and made them entertaining, then it could be like an ongoing story of this race or that race and their fight against the thing, and make it more like a science fiction story than just oh yes, I got the new expansion and this card does this card does this card does this, but more of like a storytelling aspect of the game.
Yeah, what I hope it's not, and I didn't download it to listen because I've never played the game, but in my mind, I'm like, God, I hope it's not like one of those YouTube videos where it's just recording the sound of like 4 people playing the game. There's one that's been playing in the background from the kid who's staying here in our living room, and all I hear is some high-pitched cackling laugh of what is supposed to be what I'm assuming is like a 20-year-old boy, and it is the most annoying and piercing sound. And I'm thinking, how? I mean, at first I thought it's got to be fake. It's fake because they're trying to like, whatever. But I'm like, oh, it's the most annoying videos. I couldn't stand it when my son lived with me, and used to watch them, and I can't stand them now. That is the most annoying YouTube video ever created. So maybe we'll start doing that. Just so we can hear you laugh all through a game.
High-pitched cackling over games.
Yeah.
Only when I get to pull out my my trump card on you, or declare grand teach you.
No, only when you lie through your teeth during a doppelganger game. You stand there like, oh, so, all right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up this episode. I think we're probably about an hour and a half in, roughly. Yep. I think it's going to wrap this one up. We're going to put this one to bed, and so we can get it edited and up into the cloud, on the cloud, in the cloud, wherever it's going. So if you want to reach out to us, let us know, hey, get that game out of the vault, or hey, put this one in the vault, or here's 10 more you should put in the vault. Go out and play some new games, guys. We're tired of hearing about the other ones. Let us know. You can send us a message on Facebook. We have the Board Game Buffet podcast page. Send it in a tweet at Board Game Chats, or you can send us an email at let's try that again. Send in an email to boardgamebuffetpodcast@gmail.com. How about you, Graham?
You can send me an email at Four Corners of the Board or acrossthegameboard@gmail.com. Either one I still use. Carrying on a conversation on both of those emails with some of our listeners. I am on Twitter at Four Corners Board. This number 4 Corners Board.
How are you?
I lurk on Twitter.
Okay.
If you want to direct message me on Twitter, that's also there. I do want to say that we need to thank our top tier Patreon listeners, Tom and Viger. We really appreciate your support. And of course, we support appreciate all of our Patreon backers. If you want to look into that, you can go to patreon.com/bgbuffet and see the different tiers we offer there. And that's it for me.
All right. Well, episode 91 is done. Please, as always, everyone, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. See ya.
See ya.